Commander Jiwan stood on the bridge of the exploration ship New Seoul, watching the stars drift past the main viewport. They had been traveling through this empty sector for 3 weeks now, mapping new systems and looking for planets that might support human colonies. It was boring work, but necessary. Humanity needed room to grow. "Commander," called out Navigation Officer Do-Yun from his station, "I'm picking up something strange on long-range sensors. Looks like a debris field about 2 hours ahead." Ji-won walked over to look at the display. The screen showed scattered chunks of metal floating in space, some pieces as large as buildings. "How old do you think it is?" Do-Yun ran the sensors again. "Hard to say. The metal looks different from anything in our database. Could be centuries old, maybe longer." "Take us in for a closer look," Ji-won ordered, "but keep our shields up. We don't know what caused this mess." As the New Seoul approached the debris field, the crew could see the remains of what had once been massive ships. The designs were completely alien, smooth curves and organic shapes that no human engineer would ever think to build. Some pieces still glowed with faint energy readings. Medical Officer Hyuna looked up from her scanner with excitement. "Commander, I'm detecting a life sign. Very weak, but definitely there." Ji-won felt her heart speed up. "Where?" "That large piece over there." Hyuna pointed to what looked like the broken hull of a ship about the size of a city bus. "The reading is coming from inside." "Could it be human?" asked Do-Yun. "No," Hyuna shook her head. "The biological signature is completely different." "Whatever it is, it's definitely alive, but barely." Ji-won stared at the wreckage. They were light years from any known shipping routes. No human had ever been this far from Earth. Whatever was in there had been waiting a very long time. "Prep the boarding shuttle," she ordered. "Hyuna, grab your medical kit, we're going to take a look." 20 minutes later, Ji-won floated through the airlock of the alien ship with Hyuna close behind. Their helmet lights cut through the darkness, revealing corridors that curved in impossible ways. The walls were covered with strange symbols that seemed to shift when they weren't looking directly at them. "Life signs are getting stronger," Hyuna reported through the comm. "Whatever it is, we're getting close." They found him in what looked like a medical bay. The creature was lying in a transparent pod filled with glowing blue liquid. He was clearly not human. His skin was pale blue, his limbs were longer than they should be, and he had slits along his neck that opened and closed, like gills. But his face was so human-like that Ji-won gasped when she saw him. "Is he alive?" she whispered. Hyuna ran her scanner over the pod. "Barely. This machine is keeping him alive, but it's failing. We need to get him back to our ship now if we want to save him." Moving the alien was difficult, the pod was heavy, and they had to be careful not to damage the life support systems. But finally they got him into their shuttle and back to the New Seoul. In the ship's medical bay, Hyuna worked for hours to understand the alien's biology. His blood was green instead of red, and his organs were arranged differently than a human's. But the basics were the same: heart, lungs, brain. She managed to connect him to their life support systems just as his pod finally died. 3 days later, he woke up. Ji-won was in the medical bay when his eyes opened. They were large and dark, like a deer's eyes. He tried to sit up but was too weak. When he saw Ji-won, he made a sound that might have been words, but she couldn't understand them. "Easy," she said gently. "You're safe now. We found you in the debris field." The alien looked confused. Then he seemed to remember something. He pointed frantically at a device attached to his wrist. Hyuna carefully removed it and handed it to him. With shaking fingers, he pressed several buttons. A hologram appeared in the air above the device. It showed creatures that looked like him, the same blue skin and long limbs. But these were in chains. They were being forced to work in what looked like mines or factories. Many looked sick or injured. The alien pointed at the hologram, then at himself. Then he made a gesture that was unmistakably a plea for help. "He wants us to help them," Ji-won said softly. Do-Hyun, who had been working on translating the aliens' language, looked up from his computer. "I think I'm starting to understand some of his words. His name sounds like Kato. And I think he's trying to tell us about his people." Over the next few days, they learned more. Cato's people were called the Villani. They had been peaceful explorers much like humans, but they had been conquered by something called the hegemony, a vast empire that enslaved entire species and worked them to death. The Villani had tried to escape. Cato had been on one of their ships when it was attacked. He was the only survivor, and he had been drifting in that broken ship for months, maybe years. How many of his people are left? Jiwan asked Do-hyun. From what I can understand, maybe 10,000. Out of billions. Jiwan felt sick. An entire civilization, nearly wiped out. And for what? So the hegemony could have more workers for their factories and mines. We have to help them, she said. Commander, Huna said carefully, we're just one ship. Earth has maybe 50 colonies, and most of them are still struggling to survive. What can we possibly do against an entire galactic empire? Jiwan looked at Cato, who was watching them with those large, hopeful eyes. He had shown them recordings of Villani children in chains. Children who looked so much like human children that it hurt to watch. I don't know, she admitted. But we have to try. We can't just leave them to die. She walked over to Cato and took his hand. His skin was cool and smooth, but his grip was surprisingly strong. We'll help you, she said, speaking slowly so Do-hyun could translate. I don't know how, but we will find a way to help your people. Cato's eyes filled with tears. He squeezed her hand and spoke in his own language. Even without translation, Jiwan understood. He was saying thank you. As the new soul turned toward Earth, carrying their unexpected passenger, none of them realized they had just made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. They had chosen to save one life, not knowing that this choice would lead them to save millions. But that's what humans do. When they see suffering, they try to stop it. When they find someone who needs help, they help. Even if it seems impossible. Even if it might cost them everything, especially then. The United Earth Council chamber fell silent as Cato finished speaking. The alien stood at the center of the great hall, his blue skin gleaming under the bright lights. Around him sat representatives from every human colony, their faces grave. As they listened to his translated words, Jiwan watched from the gallery as President Taiho leaned forward in his chair. 3 months had passed since they brought Cato to Earth. 3 months of learning his language, understanding his story, and preparing for this moment. Let me make sure I understand, President Taiho said slowly. Your people, the Villani, number fewer than 10,000 survivors. They are scattered across 17 different worlds, all under hegemony control. They are forced to work in dangerous conditions, and many die every day. Cato nodded sadly. Through the neural translation device that scientist Yunji had developed, his words came out in perfect English. My people were once 3 billion strong. We explored the stars in peace. We helped other species when we could. The hegemony destroyed us not because we threatened them, but because we refused to join their empire. Admiral Minho stood up from his seat. He was a practical man who had fought in the border wars 20 years earlier. With respect to our guests, this is not our fight. Humanity has been in space for less than 50 years. We have 57 colonies, most of them barely self-sufficient. The hegemony controls thousands of worlds. Starting a war with them would be suicide. Several other representatives nodded in agreement. Colony Governor Wanho spoke up. Admiral, Minho is right. We're still trying to feed our own people. How can we possibly take on a galactic empire? But Nari, the youngest representative in the council, raised her hand. At only 28, she represented the newest human colonies in the Outer Rim. May I ask our guest a question? President Taiho nodded. Nari looked directly at Cato. In all the years since your people were enslaved, has any other species ever tried to help you? Cato was quiet for a long moment. No, he said finally. Many species know what the hegemony does. Some even feel sorry for us. But none have ever risked their own safety to help strangers. Your people saved my life when they could have simply passed by. This is why I have hope. But what makes you think we can succeed where others fear to try? Admiral Minho demanded. Cato turned to face him. Because you are here, asking these questions. Because you brought me to your home world instead of abandoning me. Because when Commander Jiwan saw recordings of Vallani children in chains, she wept. The hegemony rules through fear. You lead through compassion. That is why you will win. The council erupted in heated debate. Some representatives argued that humanity wasn't ready for galactic war. Others insisted that they had a moral duty to help. The argument went on for hours. Finally, President Taiho called for order. We will vote tomorrow, he announced. Tonight, I want everyone to think carefully about what kind of people we want to be. That evening, Jiwan found herself walking in the gardens outside the council building with Kato. The alien moved carefully, still recovering from his long ordeal, but his step seemed lighter now that he was no longer alone. Are you afraid? She asked him. Every day for years, he replied, but less so now. Your people give me something I had forgotten. Hope. What if we can't do it? What if we try to help and fail? Kato stopped walking and looked at her with those large, dark eyes. Then at least we will have tried. That is more than anyone else has done. The next morning, the vote was close. 28 representatives voted to authorize military action. 26 voted against. President Taiho had the deciding vote. I keep thinking about something my grandmother used to tell me, he said as the chamber waited in silence. She said that having power means nothing unless you use it to protect those who can't protect themselves. Today, humanity has the power to make a difference. I vote yes. The authorization passed, but barely, and it came with strict conditions. The military operation would be classified. Publicly, humanity would continue to appear as peaceful explorers. The real war preparations would happen in secret. Admiral Minho, despite his earlier objections, was put in charge of the military buildup. If we're going to do this impossible thing, he told the council, we'll need to be smarter than our enemies. We can't match them ship for ship, so we'll have to outthink them. Seung, Earth's top weapons designer, began studying hegemony technology from Kato's wrecked ship. Engineer Yuna started designing new types of spacecraft, fast, stealthy ships that could strike without warning. Meanwhile, Kato worked with military strategist Junho to identify which worlds held Vallani prisoners. The alien had an incredible memory for details. He could describe the layout of mining facilities he had worked in years ago, down to the number of guards at each checkpoint. The hegemony thinks we are broken, he explained as they studied star charts. They do not expect resistance. That will be our advantage. Months passed. In shipyards hidden throughout the outer colonies, humans built the largest military fleet in their history. The ships were small compared to hegemony vessels, but they were fast and packed with weapons based on stolen alien technology. Jiwan was promoted to admiral and given command of the fleet. Standing on the bridge of her new flagship, the Indomitable, she felt the weight of responsibility. They were about to attempt something that most of the galaxy would consider impossible. All ships report ready, her communications officer reported. Jiwan looked at Kato, who stood beside her wearing the uniform of the Human Vallani Alliance. It was a uniform that officially didn't exist, for a war that wasn't supposed to be happening. Any final words? She asked him. Kato nodded and activated the ship's communication system. His words were broadcast to every ship in the fleet, then translated into dozens of human languages. My people have suffered in darkness for so long that many have forgotten what hope feels like, he said. But today, hope returns to the galaxy. Today, we prove that good people will not stand by while innocents suffer. Today, we show the hegemony that their age of terror is ending. Admiral Jiwan took a deep breath and gave the order that would change everything. All ships jump. The human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with them the hopes of 10,000 enslaved Vallani and the determination of an entire species that had decided to risk everything for strangers they had never met. Behind them, Earth continued its peaceful existence, unaware that its children had just declared war on the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Ahead of them lay 17 different worlds where Vallani prisoners waited in chains, not knowing that salvation was racing toward them at faster than light speed. The impossible had begun. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of hegemony territory like ghosts materializing from the void. Admiral Jiwan stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the tactical display show 17 different attack groups spreading out toward their targets. Each group carried the same symbol on their hulls, a human hand reaching toward a Vellani hand, with words in both languages. No one left behind. All groups report ready, Communications Officer Do-hyun announced. We have surprise on our side, but it won't last long. Jiwan nodded. They had studied hegemony communication networks for months. Once the first attack began, every military installation in the Empire would know about it within hours. They had to move fast. Signal all groups, she ordered. Operation Redemption is now active. Begin simultaneous strikes in 3, 2, 1. Execute. Captain So-young led the assault on mining complex Sigma-7, where 800 Vellani slaves worked in the deadly lithium mines. Her strike cruiser Defiant burst from hyperspace directly above the facility, catching the hegemony garrison completely off guard. The alien overseers had never seen human military tactics before. They were used to fighting other species who followed predictable patterns. But humans fought differently. They used their smaller size to move through spaces that larger aliens couldn't enter. They coordinated with hand signals when communications were jammed. Most importantly, they fought with a fury that came from moral conviction. Breach teams, go, So-young ordered. Human Marines in advanced armor suits punched through the facility's outer walls like they were made of paper. The hegemony guards, tall gray-skinned creatures with 4 arms, tried to organize a defense, but the humans moved too fast, hitting multiple entry points at once. Inside the mines, Kato followed the rescue teams through tunnels that stank of fear and death. Many Vellani had been underground so long they couldn't remember what sunlight looked like. When they saw him, some fell to their knees in disbelief. "You came back," whispered an elderly Vellani female, her blue skin marked with scars from years of abuse. We thought everyone had forgotten us." "No one is forgotten," Kato replied, helping her to her feet. "And today, no one gets left behind." The rescue operation moved like clockwork. Marines secured the facility while medical teams treated injured prisoners. Engineers disabled the mining equipment so the hegemony couldn't simply bring in new slaves later. But as the last Vellani were being loaded onto transport ships, Fleet Tactical Commander Wanho detected massive energy signatures approaching through hyperspace. "Admiral," his voice crackled over the comm. "We have a problem. Hegemony reinforcements inbound. Multiple Dreadnought-class vessels. They'll be here in 15 minutes. Jiwan felt her stomach drop. Intelligence had said the nearest. Hegemony fleet was days away. Either their information was wrong or the enemy was faster than anyone had expected. "All rescue teams, double time it," she ordered. "We need to be gone in 10 minutes. Across 17 different worlds, similar scenes were playing out. Commander Minji's team fought through a slave processing center on Kepler 442b, freeing 300 Vellani who had been scheduled for disposal, the hegemony's term for execution when slaves became too sick to work. Lieutenant Changmin led a desperate fighting retreat from an industrial complex on Proxima 7, carrying wounded Vellani through corridors filled with toxic gas, while hegemony soldiers closed in from all sides. On the ice world of Titan Delta, Captain Seo-young's Marines had to fight through a blizzard to reach the prison where Vellani were, being slowly frozen to death as punishment for a failed escape attempt. Every mission was dangerous. Every rescue cost human lives, but not a single Vellani was left behind. "Admiral," Wanho reported, "Hegemony fleet will arrive in 5 minutes. We need to jump now." Jiwan looked at the tactical display. 3 of her rescue teams were still extracting prisoners. If they jumped now, those teams would be stranded and probably killed. If they waited, the entire fleet might be destroyed. She made the hardest decision of her military career. All ships with rescued Vellani aboard. Jump immediately. Scatter to different systems as planned. Ships still conducting rescue operations, continue your missions. The rest of the fleet will buy you time. "Admiral?" Do-hyun said quietly. "There are only 6 ships still conducting rescues." We have 37 combat vessels. You're risking the entire fleet for 6 small groups. Those 6 groups contain human lives, and Vellani lives, Jiwan replied. We don't sacrifice either. The first hegemony ships emerged from hyperspace like giant predators smelling blood. They were massive, each one 3 times the size of the largest human vessel. Their weapons could destroy a human ship with a single shot, but the humans had advantages the hegemony didn't expect. Their ships were faster and more maneuverable. More importantly, they fought like humans always fought when protecting others, with absolute determination. The battle was brief but intense. Human fighters swarmed around the massive hegemony vessels like angry hornets, targeting weapon systems and shield generators. The aliens had superior firepower, but they couldn't hit what they couldn't catch. Last rescue team is clear, Wanho reported. All ships can jump. All vessels execute emergency jump, Jiwan ordered. Random vectors, rendezvous at rally point 7 in 48 hours. As the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, leaving the confused hegemony forces behind, news of the attack spread across the galaxy at light speed. Other enslaved species began to hope. The Kalan, ancient and wise, sent secret messages to Earth offering alliance. The Norathi, fierce warriors who had been conquered only a generation earlier, staged uprisings on 3 worlds. Most importantly, the message was clear to every species in the galaxy. Humanity would fight for people they had never met, risk everything for strangers, and never abandon those who needed help. Back on Earth, President Taiho received the first casualty reports. 43 humans had died in the raids, but they had rescued 4,147 Vellani prisoners and dealt the hegemony its first major defeat in centuries. Was it worth it? Admiral Minho asked during the emergency council session. Before Taiho could answer, a communication came in from the fleet. It was a recording from one of the rescue ships. Vellani children who had never seen the outside of a prison cell were pressing their faces against portholes, staring in wonder at the stars. Yes, President Taiho said quietly. It was worth it. In the deep void between stars, Admiral Jiwan's scattered fleet regrouped and prepared for the next phase. They had proven something important, that the hegemony could be defeated. Now they had to prove it again and again until every slave in the galaxy was free. Kato stood beside her, watching the rescued Vellani ships that were heading toward safety in human space. This is just the beginning, he told her. I know, Jiwan replied. The real war starts now. Behind them, the galaxy was waking up to a new reality. The age of unopposed tyranny was ending, and it was ending because one species had decided that saving strangers was worth any risk. The hunt for freedom had begun. Overlord Vexith of the hegemony stood before the massive tactical display in his command center, his 4 arms trembling with rage. The holographic map showed red warning lights across 17 different systems, each one marking a successful human raid that had freed thousands of slaves. How? He demanded, his voice echoing through the chamber. How does a species that barely knows how to travel between stars dare to attack my empire? His military advisors shifted nervously. None of them had expected this. The humans had appeared on the galactic stage only 50 years ago, and they had seemed weak compared to the ancient powers that dominated space. Now they had made the mighty hegemony look foolish. Supreme Overlord, ventured General Korax. Perhaps we underestimated their capabilities. Their ships are small but fast, and their tactics are unusual. Unusual? Vexith roared. They humiliated us. They freed thousands of our workers and escaped before we could stop them. I want every human vessel found and destroyed. I want their home world burned to ash. I want their entire species to regret the day they decided to interfere with the hegemony. Yes, Supreme Overlord. I will assemble the Grand Fleet immediately. Vexith nodded slowly. The Grand Fleet had not been assembled in over 2 centuries. It consisted of 10,000 warships drawn from across the hegemony, enough firepower to destroy entire solar systems. It would take time to gather such a force, but when it was ready, humanity would cease to exist. Meanwhile, in a hidden base in the asteroid belt of the Kepler 438 system, Admiral Jiwan met with her senior staff. The mood was tense. Intelligence. Reports suggested the hegemony was preparing something massive. They're pulling ships from garrison duties all across the Empire, reported Intelligence Officer Jinwoo. Our best estimate is that they're assembling a fleet of at least 10,000 vessels. The room fell silent. The entire human navy consisted of less than 300 ships, and most of those were small frigates and corvettes designed for hit-and-run attacks. 10,000 ships, Engineer Yuna said quietly. Even if every shot we fired destroyed an enemy vessel, we don't have enough ammunition. Then we don't fight them ship to ship, Jiwan said firmly. We're not going to win this war by playing by their rules. We need to be smarter. Jinwoo pulled up a star chart. We've been monitoring their communications. The fleet is assembling at Rally Point Omega in the Vega system. From there, they plan to sweep through human space, destroying every colony until they find Earth. Kato, who had been listening silently, spoke up. The hegemony has always won through overwhelming force. They expect their enemies to meet them in open battle and be destroyed. What if we don't do what they expect? What are you suggesting? Asked Tactical Commander Wanho. A trap, Kato replied. Make them think they've found your main base. When they arrive to destroy it, spring your surprise. Admiral Jiwan studied the star charts for a long moment. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that made her enemies very nervous. Jinwoo, how long would it take your team to hack into the hegemony communication network? We've already done it. Admiral, we've been reading their messages for weeks. Perfect. Here's what we're going to do. 3 weeks later, Overlord Vexith stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Inevitable Conquest, watching the largest fleet in galactic history prepare to enter hyperspace. 10,000 ships stretched out in formation around him. Dreadnoughts, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and fighter carriers. The combined firepower was enough to crack planets. Destination coordinates confirmed, his navigation officer reported. The human base is located in the Tau Ceti system. Our intelligence indicates it's their primary military installation. Excellent, Vexith said with satisfaction. We'll make an example of them that the entire galaxy will remember. No one defies the hegemony. The massive fleet jumped into hyperspace, carrying with it the fury of an empire that had never known defeat. They emerged from hyperspace in the Tau Ceti system, expecting to find a major human military base. Instead, they found empty space and 17,000 automated mines that engineer Seo Young had spent the previous month carefully positioning. The explosions could be seen from 3 star systems away. While the hegemony fleet reeled from the devastating trap, Admiral Jiwan launched the real attack. Human forces struck simultaneously at dozens of hegemony worlds, but this time they weren't just rescuing slaves. This time they had allies. The freed Villani had provided detailed intelligence about every hegemony installation. They knew which worlds held prisoners, which ones contained weapons factories, and which ones were critical to the Empire's economy. Commander Minji led a joint human Villani task force to liberate the Kalan homeworld. The ancient aliens had been enslaved for 3 centuries, but they had never forgotten how to fight. When human ships arrived to support them, the planet erupted in revolution. Captain Changmin coordinated with Norathai rebels to retake their home system. The fierce warrior race had been waiting for this moment, and they fought with the fury of people reclaiming their birthright. On the industrial world of Manufactorum Prime, Captain Seo Young's Marines fought alongside freed Thessari slaves to destroy the factories that produced hegemony weapons. The bird-like aliens had lost the ability to fly due to malnutrition, but they could still fight. Across the galaxy, the impossible was happening. Species that had been enslaved for generations were rising up, supported by human forces that seemed to be everywhere at once. The hegemony, which had ruled through fear for 1,000 years, suddenly found itself fighting for survival. Back in the Tau Ceti system, Overlord Vexith surveyed the wreckage of his fleet. Nearly half his ships had been destroyed or crippled by the mine trap. The remainder were scattered and confused. How did they know? He demanded. How did they know exactly where we would be? Supreme Overlord, General Korak said hesitantly, We've detected massive communication intercepts. I believe the humans have been reading our messages for months. Vexith felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. These humans weren't just lucky or brave. They were smart. They had turned his own communications network against him, used his predictable tactics as a weapon, and somehow convinced half the galaxy to rebel against him. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission on all frequencies. It appears to be coming from the human fleet." Put it through. The image that appeared on the main screen was not what Vexith expected. Instead of Admiral G1, he saw Kato standing on what was clearly a human bridge, wearing the uniform of the Human Villani Alliance. "Greetings, Overlord Vexith," Kato said in perfect hegemony standard language. "I am Kato of the Villani, speaking for the Free Species Alliance. Do you recognize me?" Vexith did recognize him. This was one of the slaves who had escaped years ago. They had assumed he was dead. "You ruled through fear," Kato continued. "You conquered through overwhelming force. You treated sentient beings as property to be used and discarded. But you made one fatal mistake. You underestimated the power of hope." The transmission shifted to show the battle raging across the galaxy. Humans and aliens fighting side by side. Slave worlds throwing off their chains. Hegemony forces retreating on dozens of fronts. "The humans saved one of us when they could have simply passed by," Kato said. "Now we have all come back for everyone who still suffers under your rule. Your age of terror is ending, Overlord, and it's ending because one species decided that doing the right thing was worth any risk." The transmission ended, leaving Vexith staring at a blank screen. Around him, his remaining fleet commanders waited for orders. But for the first time in his long life, the supreme overlord of the hegemony didn't know what to do. The galaxy had changed. The balance of power had shifted, and it had all started because humans couldn't stand to see others suffer. The reckoning had begun. The Battle of Hegemony Prime lasted 3 days and shook the foundations of the galaxy. Admiral G1 commanded the combined fleet from the bridge of the Indomitable, watching as ships from dozens of species fought together against the last stronghold of galactic tyranny. "Enemy fortress shields are at 60%, reported Tactical Officer Wanho. "But they're putting up heavy resistance. Those orbital defense platforms have weapons we've never seen before." Beside him, Kato studied the tactical display with the calm focus of someone who had waited years for this moment. The hegemony built their capital to be unconquerable. They never imagined anyone would be desperate enough to attack it directly. "We're not desperate," Jiwan replied. "We're determined. There's a difference." On the planet below, Overlord Vexith watched the impossible unfold through the reinforced windows of his throne room. The combined fleet surrounding his world included not just human ships but vessels from every species the hegemony had ever enslaved. Villani cruisers flew alongside Kalan dreadnoughts. Norathi fighters provided cover for Thesari bombers. The Zephyrians had contributed their advanced shield technology, while the ancient Andalites shared their long-range weapon systems. How did it come to this? Vexith asked his remaining advisors. How did these humans unite the entire galaxy against us? General Korax, wounded from the fighting in the outer system, struggled to stand. They didn't conquer anyone, Supreme Overlord. They simply asked for help and offered help in return. We ruled through fear. They led through hope. Hope, Vexith spat. Hope is weakness. Fear is strength. Fear keeps order. Then why are we losing? Korax asked quietly. Before Vexith could answer, the massive doors to his throne room exploded inward. Human marines in powered armor stormed through, followed by Villani soldiers and fighters from a dozen other species. Leading them was Admiral G1 herself, her uniform torn, but her eyes blazing with determination. Overlord Vexith, she said formally, by the authority of the Free Species Alliance, I place you under arrest for crimes against sentient life. Vexith drew his ceremonial weapon, an energy blade that had belonged to hegemony rulers for centuries. You think you have won? This empire has lasted 1,000 years. It will outlast you and your pathetic alliance. Your empire ended the day we decided that no one should have to suffer alone, Jiwan replied. Today we're just making it official. The final battle was brief. Vexith was skilled, but he was fighting alone against opponents who trusted each other completely. When Kato stunned him with a captured hegemony weapon, the last Supreme Overlord fell unconscious to the floor of his throne room. Within hours, the surrender was complete. Hegemony forces across the galaxy laid down their weapons as word spread that their leadership had fallen. Some tried to fight on, but without central command their resistance crumbled quickly. In the months that followed, the real work began. The galaxy was free, but freedom was just the beginning. Dr. Huna, now Director of Interspecies Medical Aid, coordinated relief efforts on hundreds of devastated worlds. Many planets had been strip-mined to the point where they could barely support life. Others were poisoned by industrial waste or scarred by centuries of abuse. The physical healing will take decades, she reported to the new Galactic Council. But the emotional healing will take generations. Many species have been enslaved, so long they've forgotten how to govern themselves. Engineer Yuna led the massive effort to rebuild damaged worlds. Human construction techniques combined with alien technology created new cities where slave barracks had once stood. Gardens bloomed on worlds that had known only factories, and Minds. Scientist Yunji established the Universal Translation Project, ensuring that no species would ever again be isolated by language barriers. The technology that had first allowed humans to understand Kato's desperate pleas for help now connected hundreds of civilizations. The new constitution of the Free Species Alliance was simple, but revolutionary. Any species could join by agreeing to 3 basic principles: no slavery, no conquest, and mutual aid when others were in danger. It's not perfect, admitted President Taiho during the signing ceremony. But it's a start. 5 years after the Battle of Hegemony Prime, a monument was unveiled on New Geneva Station. It showed the moment when Commander Jiwan and her crew had found Kaito in that derelict ship. One human hand reaching out to save one alien life. The inscription read simply, "One life saved, every life changed." Kaito, now serving as the first Vellani ambassador to the Galactic Council, spoke at the dedication ceremony. His words captured the spirit that had transformed the galaxy. They could have passed by our suffering. They could have decided it wasn't their problem. Many species knew about the hegemony's crimes and chose to look away. But humans proved that, when good people have the power to help, they will move heaven and stars to do what's right. Admiral Jiwan, now Fleet Admiral Emeritus, listened from the audience. The woman who had started a galactic war to save strangers was officially retired, but she still served as an advisor to the Alliance military. "Do you ever regret it?" asked a reporter after the ceremony. "Starting a war that could have destroyed humanity?" Jiwan thought about all the species that were now free, about the Vellani children who played in gardens instead of working in mines, about the Kalan elders who could finally practice their ancient traditions again, about the Narathi, warriors who fought for justice instead of just survival, only that it took us so long to find them. She replied. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Trade routes that had been controlled by hegemony monopolies were now open to all species. Planets that had been strip-mined for resources were being restored to their natural beauty. Most importantly, slavery had become not just illegal, but unthinkable. The idea that one species could own another was now seen as a relic of a darker age. Not everything was perfect. There were still conflicts, still problems to solve. Some worlds struggled with freedom after centuries of oppression. Some species had difficulty trusting others after so much suffering. But there was hope now. Real hope. Backed by the knowledge that if tyranny arose again, the galaxy would not stand idle. 50 years later, Fleet Admiral Emeritus Jiwan, now ancient by human standards but still sharp, visited the thriving Vellani homeworld. Children played in streets where their grandparents had once labored in chains. Artists created beautiful works where factories had once spewed poison. Scientists explored the stars in ships designed for discovery, not conquest. Kato, equally, aged but still serving his people as an elder statesman, met her at the spaceport. They walked together through the capital city, two old friends who had changed the course of galactic history with a simple choice to do the right thing. Any regrets? Cato asked as they paused at a memorial to those who hadn't lived to see freedom. Jiwan watched human and Villani children playing together in a park where a slave processing center had once stood. Their laughter carried on the wind, mixing with the songs of native birds that had returned after the pollution was cleaned up. "Only that we didn't find you sooner," she replied. They stood in comfortable silence as the sun set over a world that had known both the depths of despair and the heights of hope. Somewhere among the stars, other species continued to explore, to trade, to help each other when needed. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, and all of it was free. Because sometimes, saving one life is how you save them all. And that's what humans do. When they see suffering, they stop it. When they find someone who needs help, they help. Even when it seems impossible. Even when it costs them everything. Especially then. The galaxy learned that lesson well, and it made all the difference. The stars themselves seemed brighter now,